Okay, Year 10, this is going to be our assessment for this week. So, beginning with this extract, explore how Dickens presents the idea of redemption in A Christmas Carol. So, in an exam, you look for whatever that big idea, that topic is, and you highlight it to make sure that you're going to be writing about it. So, it could be Christianity, it could be morality or happiness, or social responsibility, it could be the family, it could be isolation, but there will be a big idea that sort of stands out as the thing that you need to write about. Okay? Also, remember that you need to keep referring to Dickens, okay? So you're actually writing about the writer, and you're very good at that, actually. So keep up with that is what I'm saying. So I'm going to take this idea of redemption. Now, it's an idea to start with what your understanding of redemption is, because then that should run all the way through your response. So I'm going to say that Dickens presents redemption as Scrooge trying to save his soul, and that he does that through making sure that his character goes through a dramatic change. And this idea of dramatic change is going to be the thing that I really fix on. I'm going to make sure that I keep coming back to how Scrooge has changed himself. So my introduction would say something like that. I'd explain a bit more. I'd say it goes from being a certain type of man to another type of man. And I'd say what those types are. I wouldn't just say that he goes through a dramatic change. I'd go into a little bit of detail, but not much, because it's only the introduction. But in the introduction, don't start quoting. Just give an overview and point to the thing that you've decided you really want to fix on. So you could fix on, for example, the idea of money. So Dickens shows redemption through the way Scrooge has started to use his money in different ways from the beginning. But obviously, if we're talking about redemption, we're talking about saving your soul, you do have to make a link, okay? At least 2 or 3 times, a link with another part of the text where he wasn't a good man. So I'm going to think about what those parts of the text are. Now I know that my extract is the one that we annotated in the last video. So it's this one that starts with the hand in which he wrote the address is not a steady one. And I've got the idea of change written down a lot of times here. So I'm just going to look at the bits that I can write the most about. Well, I really think I can say a lot about this idea of chuckling, but probably not as much as I can say about how he goes about greeting people, because look, I've got opposite description at the beginning. So he's redeeming himself by being more sociable, and I've got this idea of opposite to when he said humbug at the beginning. So I think in terms of change, I think I'm going to write about that idea. So as part of my main essay, I'm going to make sure that I'm writing about Scrooge on the streets. So back to my piece of paper here. I think the charity idea will also show how much change Scrooge has gone through. And I'll pick out one more idea. I think I might just have this chuckling idea as my substitute idea. I know I can say quite a lot about that. Now, I didn't say in the last video about chuckle being an onomatopoeic word. It sounds like a chuckle when you say it, so it gives extra depth to this description. So I might have the bit about where Scrooge is chuckling, but because I'm kind of going, I might not, I'm going to put it third on my list here. So when I write my essay, because I know that these three ideas here come up in my extract here, okay, I'm going to write about where they happen elsewhere in the text. So remember, you have to, it does say starting with the extract, and I have just started with the extract because I've looked at what I can relate my extract to. So I've thought about the extract, but I need to write about the text as a whole. That's where I'm going to begin my response. Okay, the exam question will say starting with the extract, because you need to look at the extract like I just have and said, what am I going to get the chance to write about later on? Well, let me relate it to other bits of the text. Okay, so in the whole text, in terms of streets, I'm going to write about how people avoided Scrooge. Okay, when he went out and about, they avoided him. You know, I've just realised I've written Chuck and not Chuckle. In terms of the charity workers, I'm going to say something about Scrooge and his money, that he was very uncharitable. Okay, this is for my whole text ideas. And I'm going to write something here about how Scrooge was just really terribly grumpy. Okay, I don't really want to use the word grumpy in a GCSE essay though, or in a school assessment. So I'm going to write miserable. And I'll probably use this idea of humbug. Okay, so this is where I'm going to start my response, even though I started by looking at the extract. Okay, right, now if that's a bit confusing, let's go over that again. So, here's the question. Beginning with this extract, explore how Dickens presents the idea of redemption in A Christmas Carol. So I picked out that big idea, that topic in my question, because I know the examiner is expecting me to write about redemption. And I've also put a dotted line here under Dickens to remind me that I need to write about Dickens' techniques and those habits that he gets into, like repetition and exaggeration and using similes. And in my introduction, I'm going to make sure that I say something about redemption because my examiner is expecting me to do so. So I'm going to use the word redemption, I'm going to use the word Dickens and write something like Dickens presents redemption in the way that Scrooge is trying to save his soul and the dramatic change that he goes through. Now, redemption can be a massive idea in this text, but I'm going to focus just on dramatic change, and I'm allowed to do that. Okay, that is my concept, the thing I've chosen to pick on. And then I looked at the extract to see what I would be able to write about later on. And I knew from the extract that Scrooge goes out into the streets, he meets the charity worker, and there's this lovely paragraph with no full stops in it until the end about him chuckling. So I'm going to be able to write about those three bits when it comes to the extract. So that's how I start with the extract. But I'm only starting my thinking and planning with the extract. When I write my response, I'm going to start with the whole text. I'm actually going to start with the beginning. Okay, and in terms of Scrooge being out on the streets, I'm going to write about how people avoided Scrooge. I'm going to write about this repetition of no and nobody. I won't have the book in front of me, but this is an easy win. Okay, you can easily remember that Dickens uses repetition of no and nobody to show how isolated Scrooge was. And actually, Dickens writes very, very clearly he likes it when people avoid him. So that's how I'm going to start. Okay. In terms of the charity workers, I'm going to say that he refused to give money to charity at the beginning. He said that he supports the prisons and the workhouses, and that actually that's where people should go. And I'm going to mention this idea that he thinks that if people can't afford to support themselves, then they should die and decrease the surplus population. And what I'm going to do with that is write that that's a really horrifying idea. Also, though, this is a really good opportunity to use some context from my knowledge organiser. So I know that there was an economist called Malthus who felt that if people had families when they could afford them, then that would be better. And he felt that there wasn't enough food to support everybody in the world, and that Dickens didn't support this idea, and he felt that there was enough to go around, and it was mankind's responsibility to make sure that everybody had enough to eat. Okay. And then in terms of this idea of chuckling, so I need another piece of paper. What I'm going to be saying is this seems, compared to beginning, it's like compared to beginning, I could write compared to start, that would be a lot quicker, wouldn't it? So compared to the start, it's a complete contrast. Pen seems to be running out a little bit now. Stop using it. Okay. Now, if you're a sophisticated thinker and writer, then you would write probably about what happens at the beginning of the text, okay? And then you'd link it to the extract. You'd write about what Scrooge is like at the beginning of the text, and then you'd link it to the extract. Right, so you wouldn't do all the red bits and then a big chunk of blue bits. You'd do the background, you'd do the linking to the whole text, and then you'd draw it into the extract. Okay, and then with this one as well, you'd write about Scrooge being so miserable at the beginning, and then you'd link it to the extract. Okay? And in another video, I'm going to show you what my response was. Not yet, that wouldn't be appropriate, and we'll pull that apart